Hey there everyone, and welcome to some more dragon reviews, looking at the fourth, I believe, set of attacker dragons. These three are a bit of an odd group. They are very different from each other and a little difficult to explain, but we'll get into that when we look at them. So these dragons are Xeno, Nocturo, and Furion. Now first of all, looking at the number of claws, silver, and fish that they take to level up. The first one, Xeno here, this takes an odd number of silver. It's a kind of in-between before they made them super expensive, but after they started increasing the expense. So normally it's like 14 million or so. This one's 25 million. So it's towards the more expensive ones, but it's not as much as we see on some of the later dragons. And claws-wise, it does the thing of going up to 300 claws. It takes 1,200 claws, a bit more than the 800 to 850 that we see on the earlier dragons. The main thing though is the fish. It takes 4.5 times what the cheap dragons take. We saw they all take a sort of certain amount, which is 45 million, and then there's some which take triple, then there's some which take 4.5 times, and Xen is one of them. So yeah, a lot of fish to get this dragon up, quite a lot of resources in general. Nocturo is the next one. This one takes more silver, a little bit more silver, not quite at the amount which some of the later dragons take, but so it starts off a bit cheap with the 2 million, 3 million. Claws-wise, takes 1,600, roughly double what we saw in the earlier ones. You need quite consistent number of claws to go up the qualities. And then fish, again, like Xeno, it's 4.5 times. Very expensive to get this up to level 120. And lastly, the third one here is a very odd one. So this, claws-wise, silver-wise, very similar to the last two. But it takes the normal amount of fish. However, it goes all the way up to level 150. Now this actually dates back to a particular event that was going on, festival. So we had to level this up, and I believe there was a leaderboard for it. Actually, maybe I'm thinking for Golden Scourge. For Furion, I can't remember if this is true. But anyway, they needed it to be higher than level 20 for some reason. For a leaderboard or something like that. They didn't want a tie, so they made it go to 150, or it was something else. I can't remember exactly. But anyway, it takes the normal number of fish, but goes all the way to level 120, so in total, it takes a lot of fish. It's about half what Xeno and Nocturo take to get to maximum. So that's those three dragons. Let's have a look at their skills. The first dragon we're going to look at is Xeno. And bear in mind this is Shadow, so it's doing and taking half damage from these enemies. So this is, if you were to turn an archer into a dragon, basically. The archers generally use a basic attack build, and this is exactly what Xeno is doing. It's using a basic attack build. So the first skill is the only odd one, and that it only uses at close range. It's a 15-second cooldown. It attacks a nearby enemy for 2 times basic attack damage. That doesn't increase with training, do note. And then it grants Xeno a 20% damage buff and damage reduction effect for how long? For 10 seconds. And also a 2.5% heal over time, twice per second for 10 seconds. So that's 5% each second. You can see it happening now. It's going up 5% each second. And then it's going to be, in total, 50% heal. So Xeno is going to use this at close range to heal up, basically. It helps it tank a bit, as you can see right now. It can take some hits and then heal back up. The second skill is the really interesting one. So this adds an air effect, damage over time, that you can see right now. So Xeno wants to fight in close range. I'm just going to point that out now. It's a weird one that really wants to fight in close range, even though I said it's like an archer. But anyway, deals damage over time to everything around it, dealing 1 times basic attack damage twice per second, so basically 2 basic attacks per second every second for 25 seconds. In total this does a massive amount of damage, however the hits don't crit, so that's slightly disappointing. It would be amazing if they did crit, but unfortunately they don't crit. So this does constant damage to everything around it, and also, I forgot to mention, it deals a 50% slow to enemies around it. That's very useful for keeping this dragon alive, because these enemies come in nearby and then, they have a hard time getting the last little bit before they can actually start doing damage to Xeno. and Xeno's going to hurt them the whole time while they're in this area, as well as doing the basic attacks. So the other thing that isn't noted on the skill description, but I've noted here, is that the second skill, the buff skill, actually triples the attack rate of the basic attack. So you can see he's attacking ridiculously fast. It's every 0.67 seconds. So compared to other attacker dragons, which attack every 2 seconds, Xeno's basic attack has got good. And now you can see without the buff, it is attacking every 2 seconds. So it's definitely this buff which is making it attack quickly. Anyway, so it's doing these basic attacks very frequently. It does damage to things nearby, it slows things, it's got a heal skill which it uses when enemies are close. Overall, this dragon is kind of built to tank and attack at close range, and does very consistent damage with its basic attacks. That's how it works. It's nice and consistent. I like that in a dragon, for a dragon that's going to be sitting there tanking especially. And what's really good is in PvP, this will slowing enemies is very, very good, and it will go up to enemies and then just really disrupt their movement with that slow, as well as like just chipping away at their health constantly. The thing I forgot to mention is the third skill, which is a passive, means that every basic attack it does has a 25% chance to pierce, which you'll see on some of these attacks they'll go through. It's not going to happen now, is it? Oh, there we go. There was one that pierced. So the basic attacks are better, and it can deal a little bit better area of effect type stuff. On top of this constant damage it's dealing, it's also going to pierce through and hit some enemies. So this whole time, again, bear in mind, it's doing half damage. It's pretty nice, consistent damage. I do like this dragon a lot. I think the design's very cool. It's a good dragon all round for, you know, tanking demon damage and all the rest of it. But I think by this point, Rumboard really worked out how to make interesting attacker dragons that don't just die off when they get attacked at close range. And the piercing stuff is very cool. Anyway, that's Xeno. Let's move on to the next one. Next we have Nocturo, and I'm going to flat out say I don't really know how this one works. It's very difficult to pick out how it works. Bear in mind also it's Shadow, so dealing with these enemies it's going to do half damage and take half damage too. So this dragon is very, very weird. The basic attack is replaced with a close range attack, so this is actually a close range dragon, and it does it has a chance, it does mark targets. So it marks them every time, but it's like a hidden mark, you can't see it happening. And then at some point when it hits 5 marks, like marking 5 different enemies, but that's not quite that. Or when it hits 5 marks, I don't know. It's really obscure. It seems to be when it hits a few enemies, then it happens. It needs to sort of do this basic attacks on a few different enemies, and then it will trigger and make a massive explosion. We'll see it happen later on. You'll definitely see it happen, and it does a lot of damage. But it's very unclear what triggers it. So I'll just talk through that skill. It's the second skill. So every basic attack, it marks a single target. When Nocturo has marked 5 enemies, a big area of effect goes out around Nocturo, dealing 9 times basic attack damage. Now, that 9 times is slightly misleading. It's actually going to be more, because the first skill... Oh, there we go. That was the explosion. Dealing the damage. It's not going to be that impressive because it's halved against these shadow enemies. But anyway, the first skill is a 15-second cooldown, and it does this cone thing which hits an enormous area. It actually... This is flashing. You might notice it's flashing, or I don't know. Anyway, the cone goes a really, really long way, and anything affected by it will take 1.6 times damage from Nocturo for the next 10 seconds. With a 15-second cooldown, it means that most of the time that's going to be the case, that things take 60% extra damage. Yes, so it also just needs to touch them with the cone, so if it spins around, it happens to spin around for whatever reason, it's going to get that on them, and then they take 60% extra damage. That's nice because the explosion goes everywhere, and it's around Nocturo, so if it happens to... You know, if it's surrounded by some enemies, sometimes it will then sort of target a different enemy if that seems like it's closer or something, and then it will hit them all with that. And then the third skill is a passive, which means there's a 10% chance to double mark them or double hit with the explosion. I'm not really sure. Sometimes the explosion seems to get 2 hits on the enemies. I'm unclear what really triggers that. But anyway, this is a weird dragon. It's very hard to evaluate, very hard to work out where I should put it in the damage per second leaderboard too, because like, what triggers the explosion? How can you reliably trigger that? If it's fighting just a single boss, it won't really do it. And what I really hate about this dragon is it's an attacker dragon. Oh, there we go. That was a nice big explosion. It's an attacker dragon, but it attacks in close range. This dragon just doesn't fight like an attacker dragon, and it's too obscure and weird. I don't like it that much, as you can probably tell. But all that said, the damage output from it, from the explosions, if they happen, is very good. So, yeah, it's reasonable. It's fine. I think I've said enough, like how weird this one is, and hopefully you have some idea of how it works. If you do know better than me and you've figured out how it works, please do let me know in the description. In the comment section, and I'll add it in the description. But I could not figure this one out. Lastly, we have Furion. This one is nice and simple. Furion works like some of the earlier attacker dragons. It has 2 skills, and they're nice and simple. So the first one is for 25-second cooldown. It creates an area on the ground for 10 seconds that boosts nature by 59.6%. Now, this is just bad programming. It should be 60%, but because there's 99 training from level 1 to 100, they stupidly didn't do it, so it goes and it gives a 60% boost. I'll prove it in a second when it does the aura again. But anyway, 59.6. What's really annoying about this is it doesn't do it for Furion itself. It also weirdly sometimes kind of creates it off-center. So as you can see here, I've got like the 85.6 rather than 86 here. Anyway, you also saw the aura went off to the side rather than around Furion. It doesn't seem to reliably put it under itself, which is a little odd and annoying, because you want to be able to gain main benefit from it by being next to the dragon or something, rather than having to like run into it when it goes there. You can see the little buff above me to show that I'm being buffed by nature, which is kind of nice. Anyway, the second skill has a 10-second cooldown. This is the damage skill of the dragon. It homes in on nearby enemies, goes right next to them, and then after a few seconds, it says 6 seconds on the description, from it being created, it then explodes. At that point, it deals 4 times basic attack damage to anything nearby. So, this dragon has 1 damage skill, which does 4 times basic attack damage. It's a 10-second cooldown. It's not very good for damage. It's pretty low. Like this attacker dragon does not do good damage. The 2 attacker dragons we saw before were both shadows, so they're doing half. So this is kind of doing better than them. But I was removing the tough enemies because I think they probably kill Furion off. The main use of this dragon is buffing your nature stat. So it's good for guild raids if you want to buff your nature stat, or just boss battles and stuff. If you're using a nature build, it can do good there. Maybe in PvP, it can give you a nature boost, so you do a bit more nature damage. That's pretty much all it does. Other than that, it doesn't do very much damage. It is a little disappointing because it's one of the only 2 dragons in the game that go to level 150, so it has higher stats than other things, but it doesn't utilize them at all. Anyway, that's how this dragon is. It's just pretty simple and little damage dragon. So let's have a look at the leaderboard to see where these 3 fit into the overall damage per second. So firstly we had Xeno. Xeno is pretty high. This is just behind, well I say just behind, it's sort of what we have as a drop from the best ones. So the best ones, excluding Nocturo as a support dragon, exclude these 2 as well because they're pet dragons. We have Avalanche with the massive single target. We then have Fracture and Darkheart with good over effect. Then we have Chrysalis, which is good all round, sort of bit of over effect, bit of single target. And they're all kind of like, we've got 12, 14, Avalanche is 32, but that's single target. So, that's the kind of region. And then it drops to 10, and then we have like 9, 8, that's how it goes down. So Xeno is a drop down from the best ones, but it is up there and pretty solid. Good damage dragon. It does it as a small of effect, I put it as, because it does have the piercing on the basic attacks. It has the large air effect as well, that slow thing, and that slow damage over time around it. And also it heals up and tanks and that kind of stuff. Really nice dragon all round. It's not like super special, not amazing, but the damage output's pretty good, and considering what it does, I think it's a really nicely designed dragon. The next one was Nocturo. Now Nocturo, like I said, incredibly hard to place. I put it as sporadic for consistency. I think it's the most sporadic dragon that there is. It's really hard to place, and I put it around here. I can't remember exactly what I did, to figure out what it would do as a total damage per second. But yeah, basically, it's not gonna do too much. It's quite, it's okay, but it's really awkward. And if someone can figure it out and then try and help it do its explosions more frequently, you can probably make it work well. But otherwise, it's quite a poor dragon. And then Furion, well, this doesn't account for Furion having higher stats than the rest of them, so it is right down at the bottom. It is one of the worst for damage output. Doesn't really surprise when you think that it's only got one skill that does damage, just like Argylus here, which has one skill that does damage. Yeah, not that surprising. So Furion is one of the worst, unfortunately, but that's just how it is. So that's the 3 dragons. Hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in another video soon.